My name is Erica Nielsen. This is Multiple Strategy Instruction for Week 8. The title is Collaborative Strategic Reading. It's for lesson RI.4.2. Determine the main idea of a text and explain how it is supported by key details. Summarize the text. The objective is students will be able to coordinate a collection of strategies to guide comprehension. It's for 4th grade, about 25 to 35 minutes, and then whole groups, small group, or pairs. Okay, so let's take a look at our chart here. Today we are going to be learning about collaborative strategic reading, or CSR strategies. So collaborative means working together, and strategic reading is a plan or strategy for understanding and remembering what you read. So the CSR strategies have 4 main parts. They are the preview, the click and clunk, the get the gist, and the wrap up. So as you can see here, the preview usually happens before we read. The click and clunk and get the gist is throughout our reading, during the reading, and then the wrap up is usually after we're done reading. So we're going to be reading this text today too, Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. And I'm going to use the first 2 sections in that to model our CSR strategies. So before we read, we need to do the preview. Good readers preview a selection before reading it. Previewing has 3 steps. So if we look at our chart again, the 3 steps are scan, brainstorm what you know, and predict what you will learn. So first, let's look at scanning. This passage we're reading here is an informational text, and usually when we read informational text, they'll have graphic features such as titles, headings, maps, illustrations, captions, bold-faced text, italic text, and sidebars. So I'll begin my preview by scanning the first page, okay? So I also have it listed here. So when I look at the first page, I see our title at the top, which is Pioneers on the Oregon Trail. I also see 2 bold-faced headings, The Way West and Packing for the Journey. I see a sidebar here with italic text. I think that's a quote there. And then it also has a picture of a covered wagonette below that. And then at the very bottom, I see a timeline of historical events. So that's my scanning there. I scan the first page just to kind of see what stands out in those graphic features. Now I'm going to brainstorm what I know. So I'll use what I saw in my scan of the text, and I will brainstorm what I already know about it. So from watching cowboy movies, I know that pioneers traveled in covered wagons, and I also know that they usually traveled from east to west. So I'm gonna write that here under my brainstorming. So pioneers traveled in covered wagons, and they traveled from east to west, okay? All right, so now that I've brainstormed and I've scanned, I'm gonna predict what I'll learn. So I'm going to think about those things that I scanned in the reading and those things that I already know from brainstorming. And then, so based on those clues in the text and what I already know, I'm going to make predictions. So based on the title and the headings and the picture of the covered wagon, I predict I will learn about pioneers' journey west to Oregon in covered wagons. Makes sense. And then based on that quote, I predict I will learn what the journey was like for pioneers. Based on the second heading, which was packing for the journey, I predict that I will learn what they packed for their journey. So I'm just gonna put those in my predictions quick. Pioneer's journey, what the journey was like, and how and what they packed. All right, so now we're getting to the middle part. So this is during our reading, the click and clunk and the gist. So first I'm going to tell you what the click and clunk is, okay? So when we read, there's usually words we know and words we don't know or don't understand. When we can read it and the words click and we're understanding it, they click like a train rolling down a track. So we just get it, they're there. Sometimes we don't understand words and then they clunk like hitting an obstacle. So those are words that we might not really understand. And those words are called clunk. And when we get towards that clunk, we need to use a fix-up strategy, such as the vocabulary strategy, to help us figure it out. So this strategy helps us figure out words, and I'm going to show you the first 4 steps of that after I read the first paragraph and see if there's any words that clunk, okay? So I'm going to read this first paragraph. The way west. In the early 1800s, Lewis and Clark explored the territory west of the Mississippi. No one knew what they would find. As they traveled, they made maps, they wrote in their journals, they described miles and miles of beautiful land with tall trees, good soil, and rushing rivers. So one word that kind of clunked for me in this first paragraph was territory. So let's write that for our clunk here on our board. So we have territory. Not really sure what that means. So our first step in the vocabulary strategy is to look for context clues. So you read the words and phrases and sentences surrounding the word territory to see if anything fits. So I remember in the 5th sentence here, it says, miles and miles. So territory might have something to do with land. No. Step 2A says to try and break the word into parts. I don't really see a meaningful prefix or suffix, so I'll skip to step 3. Step 3 says to use the context clues I found in step 1 to guess the meaning of the word. So because I saw miles and miles, I think that territory might mean a big area of land. So now our last step, step 4, is to use that, a big area of land, in place of the word in our reading. So I'm going to change that when I read. Lewis and Clark explored the big area of land west of the Mississippi. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I think that's what I'm going to put for clunk. Territory equals big area of land. So now I figured out my clunk word there. Our next part is to get the gist. So another thing good readers do is identify the most important ideas in their reading. They can shrink the information in the paragraph into a main idea statement that tells us what the important idea is, okay?
Okay.
So let's reread the first paragraph, and then we're going to use our paragraph shrinking steps here that we did. So we're going to identify who or what, the most information about the who or what, and then we're going to shrink the information into a main idea statement of 10 words or less, okay? So let's read that paragraph again. In the early 1800s, Lewis and Clark explored the territory west of the Mississippi. No one knew what they would find. As they traveled, they made maps, they wrote in their journals, they described miles and miles of beautiful land with tall trees, good soil, and rushing rivers. Okay, so first, we have our who and what, and that was Lewis and Clark. Now, what was important about the who or what? Most important information about them was that they explored the territory west of the Mississippi in describing it in their maps and in their journals that they wrote. Now I need to shrink all that information into a really good main idea sentence, okay? So I'm gonna say, Lewis and Clark were first to explore the territory west of the Mississippi. I think that's my gist, so I'm gonna jot that down. All right, we're gonna continue this process for the second paragraph and for the packing the journey, so 2 more paragraphs. And this time I want you to kind of help me, okay?
Okay.
All right, so let's read the second paragraph. News about the wonders of the West spread. people began to dream about a new life in a new land, and before long they began traveling west on the Oregon Trail. At first, there were only a few adventures. In 1843, 200 families crossed the Oregon Trail. Then, in 1848, gold was discovered in California. Soon after, thousands of people began heading west, hoping to make their dreams come true. Okay, so first of all, I read that, and I didn't really have any words that clunked. I think they all were clicking there for me, so we don't need to really figure out a click or clunk word there. Now let's think of the gist of it. So the who was in this paragraph?
Travelers.
Travelers, yeah, or people, travelers, good. So we'll write that. Or, well, we won't write that yet, but we need to remember who. Now, what was the most important information about them? They were what? Traveling.
To make their dreams come true?
Yeah, they were traveling, very good. They were traveling the Oregon Trail to make their dreams come true. So, if I thought of this, I would think people traveled west hoping to make their dreams come true. What do you think of that for the gist?
Traveled west looking for gold, yeah.
Traveled west looking for gold? Oh, I like how you helped me on that one. Let's write that. All right, now let's move on to the next paragraph, and we're going to do the same thing. So this is our new heading, Packing for the Journey. So traveling west was not easy. The Oregon Trail was thousands of miles long and took between 4 and 6 months to cross. Pioneers had to pack everything they would need in a covered wagon that was not much bigger than a double bed. Once food, tools, and supplies for the journey were packed, the wagon was nearly full. As a result, there was no room left for personal belongings. But the pioneers left behind more than the comforts of their home and their special treasures. They said goodbye to family and friends they never expected to see again. Okay, so one word I'm not sure about there was belongings. So let's go through those steps of our vocabulary strategy again, okay? So first, we need to look at the context clues. The word personal is in the same sentence and might be a context clue. And then in the sixth sentence, it said special treasures, which I think might be a context clue as well, okay? So belongings could be special personal things. Now step 2 says to look for word part clues. I see 2 word parts, root words belong and suffix ings. The root word of belonging is belong. If something belongs to you, you own it. So step 3, let's guess the meaning of it. I think belongings might be what a person owns.
Yep.
So now let's try that in our sentence, okay? Let's replace belongings with what a person owns. So as a result, there was no room left for what each person owned. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I think it makes sense. So I think let's write that for clunk. Let's write belongings equals a person owns. Good. All right, now we just need to do the gist of it. The main who or what in this passage was, what do you think?
Things that they could bring with them.
Yeah, what the pioneers could take was what it was about. And then I think the most important information was that what were the only things that they could bring?
Necessities.
Yep, necessities. Exactly, that was a good word for food, tools, supplies. I mean, because the covered wagons were small, so they could only take the important things. So here's what I would say for the gist. The pioneers could fit only necessary things in the covered wagons. What do you think?
Sounds good.
All right, let's write that on our board. All right, so now let's go back to our chart here. We did the before reading, we did the during reading, and we did the after reading. Now we need to look at the after reading, the wrap up.